Okay, so welcome to another Know Now webinar. Uh, as you know, the Know Now webinar is actually something that we bring each month, and we cover different sets of topics. The whole idea is to actually cover some of the basic elements so that you guys can be instantly boost with some kind of knowledge that we are bringing through these topics. As you know, today's topic is about leadership, but more specifically, it's about how to become intentional leader and what it actually means. And hopefully you will get inspired by a great example of intentional leader. Today, as a guest speaker, we have with us Jeremy. Jeremy has been Youth Bank International Associate, I think, for almost 2 decades. And he's also a founder and director for community advancement in South Africa. And he will be sharing some of his tips and some of his understanding of leadership and intentional leadership is all about. So Jeremy, the floor is yours.
Katya, yes, thank you very much for the opportunity. It's really lovely to you aging me by saying that it's almost been 22 decades, and you are right, but you're certainly aging me. Lovely to be here today. I think maybe first and foremost, what I found this presentation would really be about my personal experiences as a leader of a community foundation, as a driver for youth bank development in South Africa and by extension of that on the African continent, and really thinking about what is some practical things that I've had to look at in my own leadership style and how that has evolved over time. So I would love for this to be hopefully a very practical and insightful conversation, and hopefully the listener can get something of value out of this. Maybe to start out, I would want to say that leadership can be really lonely at times. I mean, you can find yourself in a very lonely place at times, and that's why I think being intentional about what you're wanting to achieve is so important. And because it can be a lonely place, I think the value and importance of mentors, coaches, good relationship with your colleagues is of utmost importance. So one of the things that personally, from an intentional point of view that I've done is to have connected myself with a lot of industry leaders within the nonprofit space in South Africa and on the African continent at large. I, for example, involve myself very much in continental and local networks of community philanthropy organizations or networks, which I think is critically important. So the main purpose of my input today would be around why intentional leadership is important and in what ways intentional leadership can and does drive positive change within organizations and within the broader community. So just from an understanding or discussion point of view, what I mean when I think intentional leadership is really about some core principles that for me have defined over time intentional leadership. One of them has been on purposefulness. I've always found that whenever I wasn't too clear on what I wanted to do and where wanted to take the organization, because I am the founder and executive director of this community foundation, without very clear purpose, it has left me oftentimes unsure and uncertain places on what I want to do and how to navigate difficult times. But having a clear purpose has really been critical. So I think firstly, key core principle for intentional leadership for me has to do with purposefulness. Secondly, having a clear vision, I think has always been of critical importance for our community foundation. For example, we have annual visioning discussions. We have our 3-year strategy that we developed. We just in 2023 developed our next 3-year strategy that lead us until 2027. But having an overall vision for the organization, I think, is important, but also having shorter term visions that you want to reach, just kind of keeps or holds momentum in place for the organization and for the team as a whole in the organization. And then, of course, aligning the work of the organization with the passions and interests of yourself as a leader and of your team, because oftentimes you can get so involved in the organization's core vision, its mission, and then of course also key performance indicators, that you kind of lose the humanness that everyone brings into an organization. So I have found that aligning people's personal passions, people's interests with the overall vision and mission of the organization has been a critical importance in navigating or holding that space for individuals within the organization, people that you are leading, hold the space for them to also bring forth their own individual passions and skills and talents. I think is critically important as a core principle for intentional leadership. I do want to say that in as far as fostering empowerment of your staff for broader community development is so important. I mean, oftentimes when people talk about in any organization, you need resources, you need assets, and I have found that by really putting a focus and emphasis on the important role that your team members play as a leader is of critical importance. The people that work for the organization, for me, is the most important asset for the organization. And valuing your staff, valuing your colleagues is very important. Acknowledging simple things like acknowledging a birthday, acknowledging an anniversary of staff members, those things become important because it brings the human element and it makes people realize that they are real people that's giving their actual time for the work that we're trying to achieve for the broader community. So on my next slide, we want to talk about sort of can we cultivate good leadership, and if you can, how would we do that? And I have found that personally, I think there are several principles in as far as good leadership. Firstly, I do think it's important to lead by example. And culture within an organization really is driven by the leader. And if you are able to show with your example what you mean with, for example, being on time, right? You need to be on time. You know, something like the importance of valuing other people. You need to, as a leader, display and exemplify all those kind of very key characteristics that you want to see displayed with your colleagues within your organization. But I think that's a very intentional process. You're going to have to, you have to be specific about leading by example, and then demonstrate something. I mean, this for me is always been critical, demonstrating integrity and authenticity in your own actions. Because, I mean, integrity is something that, I mean, people always talk about integrity and trust. And once you've lost it, it's very difficult to regain it. Be it in your staff team, be it in the broader community, is really critically important for you to show integrity through your actions. And being authentic, being your true you. And if you as a leader can exemplify that, then the people that you are leading, and oftentimes I talk about leading, pushing from behind, sort of putting your people, or the people that work with you, pushing them to the forefront. By exemplifying those kind of qualities is really important in terms of leading by your example. Secondly, what I found in terms of building good leadership has to do with communicating effectively and listening actively to the ideas of your team members as well as to the concerns of your team members. Now, it can be easier said than done, especially in a fast-paced world of being results-driven. But I do think it's important to listen actively and attentively, because, like I'm saying, we are working with real people. You know, machines and assets, other assets that we use in our organizations, they are replaced easily. They don't have feelings. They don't have any dreams and ambitions. But your staff or the people that you're leading, they are real people with real issues, with proper ideas that should be considered and listened to carefully. And I do think what I have found in terms of effective communication is having open channels of communication. creating moments for people just to sit and reflect over a coffee in the morning, over informal moments of communicating. And there's organizations, larger organizations, of course, there are very interesting ways of doing that, creating interactive spaces where people can maybe lounge together, sit and have an informal conversation. And in that way, you're opening up channels of communication, which would give you better feedback, which you wouldn't ordinarily get, for example, in a staff meeting. You could get feedback from staff members from informal channels of communication, which I believe is really important. And I know we have a lot of technology that encourages that, where people can, in chat rooms, chat groups, communicate amongst each other, but also have ways to communicate ideas and concerns with the leadership and the management team. Those, I think, should be top of the agenda for a leader, to create those open communication channels where people can actually share their ideas and their concerns. I also think, as far as building or cultivating good leadership, empowering others to provide opportunities, or by providing opportunities for growth, is so important. So there's in our current day and age, we have a lot of access to online skills development opportunities, platforms people can learn online. And I do think it's important to provide those opportunities for growth for your team, so that learning doesn't become something that people should do outside of the organization. It's something that should be built into the culture of the organization, that you become a learning organization. And in our community foundation, we pride ourselves on being a learning organization. We pride ourselves on being daring enough to make mistakes and to give new ideas a chance, and getting the feedback from what has worked and might not has worked, getting that feedback to drive our future decision making within our organization. So empowering others by providing opportunities for growth, I think, is critically important. And in the same time, recognizing the contributions of others within the organization is critically important. Oftentimes you would think that, yes, this person is earning a salary, is part of their job, but really recognizing what people are bringing to the organization is I think, part of cultivating good leadership within your team that you're leading. Because as you start sharing and acknowledging people's contributions, you're cultivating within your organization leadership where people are learning to do it to others and share with others, giving them feedback on their contributions too. And then finally, I would say, having to continuously invest in your own development, and then seeking feedback from others so that you can improve your own leadership skills. One of the most difficult things, I suppose, as a leader, is to get feedback that you might not agree with. Getting someone to give you feedback that might not come across as nice. But I do think it's really important to invest, or to be open to getting getting feedback from your team. But investing in your own development, I think, is critically important, and that ties me into the conversation around mentorship and having coaches. So one of the things that I've been very specific or intentional about within our community foundation is to align myself with other community foundation leaders. I've always been part of the Youth Bank International as an associate, and through these platforms and through these engagements, you are really investing in your own development. You're learning about new ways to lead, new ways to drive change, new way to drive people, that is current. And I do think staying abreast with current leadership styles, staying abreast with what is happening in as we are evolving as people in organizations, I think is really, really important. So that investment in yourself, as a leader, I think, will remain critically important to cultivate good leadership. This leads me into sort of some key principles that we focus on, that I at least want to propose or suggest. Key principles for intentional leadership. I've already spoken about this before, but I think, just to reiterate, one is around having a clear vision and setting strong and reachable goals. and be those short-term, medium, or long-term goals, is really important. I think your vision is something that pulls you forward. Oftentimes you would have made decisions today that you might not see the value of it down the line. But if you keep focused on your vision or your intentions, it'll really pull you forward. I do think, but it's really important goal setting, and there's a lot of tools out there that you could research on how to set proper goals, how to set good goals that are achievable. There's a lot of resources online available. There's a lot of very reputable consultants in all countries around the world that actually specialize on goal setting. And in our organization, we have a number of consultants that guides us through our goal setting and our visioning processes within our community foundation. But I do think it's critically important to have a clear vision, if reachable goals, as key principles for intentional leadership. A second one for me, I would say, is having a focus on empowering others, empowering others to lead. Now, one of the things within our sector, let me just talk about South Africa. What we're finding in South Africa is that we have very strong organizations that doesn't necessarily focus very much on developing the next layer of leadership within the organization, which means that as a result, you'd have one leader being in leadership for a very long time because there's no concerted effort to prepare people within the organization to take over leadership. And now there's various ways, I suppose, for people for one to do that, to empower others to lead. Simple things like, if, for example, in our community foundation's case, through our social media, as a director of the organization, I make it a point not to be featured on our publications, on pictures. I'm not the one that people would see ordinarily. And I always would push that the staff members are the ones that the broader community would see on our communications channels. And in that way, I'm kind of making sure, or I'm hoping that it is a specific or an intentional way to not link the brand of your organization to myself as the leader of the organization, but to almost spread, so we build the brand of the organization by showing that there's other people involved in the organization. It's not just about putting all of the emphasis on the leader to drive the work of the organization. So something as simple, like I'm saying, as putting other people at the forefront of communications material is what we have deliberately started doing for the past 4 years in our organization, where team members would be in the forefront, so that as the leader would exit or as the leader would transition, it becomes easier as second-tier leaders would fulfill the leadership positions, that it wouldn't be unfamiliar, that the people that would come into leadership positions wouldn't be unfamiliar to the other stakeholders outside of the organization, be it funders. Funders ought to know that there are other people within the organization. So it's important, I think, to expose team members to your funding partners of the organization. An example of this is in my previous role in another community foundation that I worked for many years. I was always allowed by the former executive director to lead discussions and engagement when funders would visit us. And that really instilled the sense of leadership in me and a confidence in me to be able to engage with funders in one instance, but secondly, also for funders to know that if the director were to move on, that there are people capable within the organization to drive it forward. I've seen examples for example, in Uganda, there's an organization that has a very interesting approach where they have a rotational leadership structure where the executive director is there, but second-tier leaders are given half a year to run the organization as if they would be the director. And the role of the director would just be oversight, overseeing, and guidance, but really giving all of the power of the director to someone else within the organization to actually run it for 6 months and cultivate and grow and develop. And so I've seen these things as being very deliberate about giving leadership 2 second-tier leaders whilst the executive director is still in the organization. This is something that this organization is doing, and I'm very intrigued by that, to really transfer sort of leadership in a very practical way. I found that to be really important. Thirdly, as a key principle, I would want to touch just on sort of adaptive leadership and resilience. As we speak in South Africa and across the world, development aid is dwindling. A lot of organizations are struggling financially, having to really think outside of the box around sustainability, thinking outside of the box around sort of around resilience and what would that mean? And one of the key questions that you'd always get as a leader within nonprofit organizations from funders is, how do you foresee you will be able to sustain yourself once funding would dry up? Very uncomfortable question. But I do think being cognizant and being proactive around thinking about the future would make you more resilient, would ensure that you would think worst case scenario all the time. What, for example, something as simple as what would be the reality if your budget would be halved, for example, in the next year? Those things are things that I do think as leaders you want to have to think about, so that you can put measures in place once or if at all those realities would materialize, that you're able to respond to those issues. So being resilient as a leader, and being adaptive. By way of example, in our community foundation, we are now in a moment where we've just had 2 staff members that have moved on, and we're now looking at new staff members. What we're using this opportunity to think about the future of the community foundation, so that it's not just about replacing people that are leaving, but actually thinking future-proofing the organization. What skills do we now need to bring in with a future mind? So it's not just about, like I'm saying, replacing people that are leaving with the skills that they had, but actually thinking about, we have an opportunity now almost to evolve the organization by bringing in 2 fresh people with 2 fresh mindsets, and being open and flexible, and being adaptive as a leader to that. So yes, moments of crisis brings tremendous opportunity. And if you're open to those crisis moments and see it as an opportunity, it can really open up your doors to renew your organization too. So as a leader, I do think it's important to keep an eye on those kinds of opportunities in the moment of crisis. And then, I mean, I had a question asked by, I think, a number of people who were reflecting on setback. How do we deal with setback? And I've really thought about this, and I've just given the example of sort of 2 staff members within our community foundation that has recently moved on. Something like losing a staff member can feel like a tremendous loss for the organization. We talk about intellectual property. We're talking about organizational memory that are leaving, right? So that is an absolute setback. But I do think it is important to have the right mindset, or to have a mindset that actually can mourn when someone moves on, but do realize that it gives a new opportunity for renewal. So I think it's really around having positive mindset, because setback is something that we all face in all parts of our lives. An organization as a living organism has the same. It would also have setbacks, and so my suggestion, or one of the suggestions that I want to give in what to do when you've experienced setback, is to just keep positive mindset and an open mindset, because there's a lot of opportunity in crisis, and you can certainly turn a crisis moment into a moment of absolute renewal, if you have the right mindset to do that. I also would say it's important to analyze what went wrong, and then to learn from the experience. Oftentimes, setbacks happen, and one quickly want to move on from the setback and kind of move forward from that. But I do think it gives a moment to pause There was a moment in a previous organization where I worked where we went through some things, and I was suggesting to the then executive director that we should actually, this is giving us a fantastic opportunity to actually stop everything. Just hit the brakes and actually just reflect and see if we're still on the right path. So I think it's about analyzing where are you, what would have went wrong, and what can we learn from this, without getting too deep into the emotions of the failure or the emotions of feeling that you've lost out on something, but you actually see it as a learning opportunity if you are able to analyze what exactly, like I'm saying, would have gone wrong. And then again, I want to, this is the third time that I'm reflecting on this piece, but I do think it's critically important. Having feedback from mentors and your colleagues to gain new perspectives. If as a leader, you're the only one reflecting on things and looking for learnings, like I'm saying, it goes back to the point that leadership being a lonely place. You can go into very dark holes, very dark rabbit holes. So connecting yourself to mentors, creating opportunities to reflect with staff members and colleagues can really bring new perspectives. And I think that is really important in moments of setback, that you get differing views and different perspectives that can give a more holistic view on what for you might look as a crisis. And by getting feedback from mentors is how you actually then can uncover opportunities. This is just what I found in my personal journey as a leader. That feedback from from other mentors who would have been in this position, is that perspective could really help you to propel yourself forward. And then and it takes me to the point of then taking proactive steps forward. And this could be around revising your strategy, seeking new opportunities, refining your skills. And then always remember, I think that setback is not failure, but opportunities for growth. So those for me would be some of the elements for one to be cognizant of in moments of setback. That it is part of this experience of life. It is part of the experience of any organization, that there'll be highs and lows. But if you have a clear and a strong and a positive mindset, you can get through by connecting with others that might have been there before, and but at the same time by getting feedback and learning from that feedback. So yeah, colleagues, that would be my what I wanted to share today on intentional leadership. There's certainly a lot more that can be said on it, but I just wanted to give you a very practical input today on what has worked for me personally, and what we're sharing. And today, our community foundation in South Africa is seen as one of the most reputable community foundations, and we've come to this point because I have kind of looked at these elements that I've shared with you today. So I'm hoping that Katja, that it's useful to everyone, and I'm happy to take any further questions or suggestions.
Thank you, Jeremy. I loved how everything was, the whole topic was covered with positive vibe, and I loved that. A very practical but positive vibe around it. Thank you once again. I will stop recording. Give me a sec.